Meryl Streep, one of the most iconic actresses in Hollywood, has always been known for her grace and talent. But what if I told you that behind the scenes she's been secretly leading a global revolution? A mysterious meeting in Paris, a leaked secret that sent shockwaves around the world, and a decision that could change the fate of our planet forever. What's the real reason behind Meryl's sudden involvement in climate change activism, and who is the powerful figure pulling the strings from the shadows? Stay with me until the end to find out. This story will leave you questioning everything. Before we dive into today's jaw-dropping story, drop a comment below letting us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this. It was an ordinary day for Meryl Streep. Well, as ordinary as it gets for someone with her legendary status. The phone calls were routine, the interviews were brief, and her team was buzzing around, managing the usual demands of a Hollywood A-lister. Meryl was in her New York apartment, sipping tea, her mind already on the next project. Then out of nowhere it arrived. A single email. She clicked it open, her eyes scanning the words quickly. It was short, cryptic, and strangely enough, anonymous. A private meeting. Paris. It's time. Meryl paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her heart skipped a beat. Paris? A private meeting? She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen as her thoughts swirled. Who could possibly need to meet her in Paris? A film director? She thought of the numerous directors and producers she'd worked with, but none of them had contacted her in this way. A political figure? She couldn't imagine herself caught up in anything political. Or perhaps someone with global influence, someone who had the power to bring her to the heart of Europe without explanation. The email didn't explain much, only that the meeting was important. The promise, however, was clear. This could change the course of her career or even her life. Meryl's gaze shifted to the window. The streets below were bustling with life, but up here in her quiet sanctuary she felt removed from it all. Yet something about this message gnawed at her. The promise of change, of something bigger than herself, lingered. For Meryl, privacy was sacred. She had always been careful with her image, meticulously curating every aspect of her public persona. She wasn't one for surprises, certainly not ones that involved travel, secrecy, and an unknown purpose. She had worked too hard to build a reputation to protect her personal life. But this felt different. The more she thought about it, the more her curiosity grew. Could it be a project? A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Or perhaps a danger she couldn't yet comprehend? The longer she sat there, the more her instinct told her that this wasn't just another job. This wasn't another film offer, another gala. It was something else entirely. After a long pause, she typed a simple reply, "I'll be there." She hit send, and as the email disappeared into the ether, Meryl couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something much bigger than herself. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an invitation to something that would change the course of everything. Paris, city of romance, art, and now mystery. As Meryl's cab pulled up in front of the building, she couldn't help but feel the surreal quality of it all. Paris had always been a place of glamour and grandeur, but this was different. This was not the glitzy Paris of film premieres and fashion shows. This was something far quieter, more subdued. The hotel looked like it had been frozen in time, old, regal, with a touch of faded elegance. The kind of place you wouldn't expect to see a celebrity like Meryl Streep. There were no flashing lights, no red carpets, no eager photographers waiting for her to make her grand entrance. Just the soft murmur of voices in the background, the whispers of people who knew something she didn't. She glanced around, her heart racing. The streets were calm, almost too calm. No one was watching, or at least that's what it seemed. But Meryl had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. She stepped out of the car, smoothing her coat as she adjusted to the chill of the Parisian evening air. Every step felt heavier as she walked through the front door. This was a place where secrets were kept, not shared. A man in a sharp suit greeted her at the entrance, his expression unreadable. He didn't say much, only nodded and led her through a labyrinth of winding corridors. Meryl's heels clicked against the polished marble floors, each echo amplifying the strange feeling that something was off. The walls seemed to close in as they passed, leading her deeper into the hotel's secluded inner sanctum. Finally, they arrived at a door marked with a simple brass plaque, nothing more than a number. The man gave a brief knock before opening it to reveal a room that felt like it had been pulled straight from another era. The air inside was thick with secrecy, as though every corner was hiding something. The lighting was dim, the room cast in shadows, and the heavy curtains were drawn to ensure no prying eyes could see in. Meryl stepped inside, the door closing softly behind her. She looked around at the faces gathered there. It wasn't a crowd, just a handful of people, but their presence was enough to fill the room with an electric tension. Eyes flickered toward her, some with recognition, others with curiosity. Every person seemed on edge as though they were waiting for something to happen. The conversations were hushed, almost too quiet, and Meryl felt the weight of their attention as she took a seat in the far corner. What had she walked into? Her mind raced with questions, but no one offered answers. Everyone had their own purpose for being there, and whatever it wasn't meant for the public to know. She could feel the intensity in the air, voices barely above whispers, the sound of papers shuffling, the occasional glance exchanged across the room. It was clear, whatever was happening here, it was big. Bigger than anything she had ever been a part of before. Meryl sat back, trying to steady her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She was no stranger to high-stakes situations, but this felt different. This felt like the beginning of something far more dangerous, and far more important, than she had ever imagined. As the last person entered the room, the door clicked shut behind them and the atmosphere shifted. It was as if the world outside had vanished, and all that remained was the silent, expectant tension of those gathered. Meryl knew that this moment, this meeting, would set everything in motion. The world would change, but she didn't know yet whether it would be for better or worse. She only knew one thing: she was now part of something much bigger than herself. And there was no turning back. Just as the meeting began, a sharp buzz pierced the quiet atmosphere. Meryl's hand instinctively moved to her phone, which lay on the table in front of her, almost as if it had a mind of its own. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, each more alarming than the last. Someone, anonymously of course, had just spilled the beans. The world had learned that Meryl Streep was in Paris. The news had broken and the internet exploded into a frenzy. Tweets, blog posts, and headlines flooded every corner of the digital world. But who was behind it? How had it happened? Meryl's stomach sank as she scanned the notifications, most of which were tagged with her name in all caps. Meryl Streep in Paris. What's she really doing there? Exclusive. Meryl Streep caught in secret meeting with world leaders. What's behind the closed-door gathering? She looked up at the others in the room. Everyone had their heads down, their phones glowing, their expressions shifting from curiosity to tension. The leak had hit the airwaves harder than anyone could have predicted. Meryl felt the room grow colder. The privacy she had so carefully guarded for years was being ripped apart in real time. Someone had broken the trust. But who? Was it someone in the room? Had an insider let something slip, or was there a mole in the camp? The leak wasn't about Meryl's usual red carpet appearance or the typical Hollywood glamour. This wasn't about a movie, a film premiere, or a new endorsement deal. The leak painted a picture that was much more significant, something that reached far beyond the world of entertainment. This was global. It was urgent. And it was clear that Meryl had stepped into something much larger than she'd anticipated. On the screen of her phone, she saw tweet after tweet, the hashtags trending worldwide. Hashtag Meryl in Paris, hashtag secret meeting, hashtag what is Meryl up to. People were speculating wildly. Some believed it was a new film project. Others whispered about politics or even espionage. Meryl's name was now synonymous with a massive, unfolding mystery. The details were sparse, but the questions were everywhere. The internet was obsessed. What was the actress involved in? Why was she meeting in secret? Was she working with political figures? Activists? Business moguls? And why Paris? What had once been an intimate, behind-closed-doors gathering had now become the subject of global speculation. The media was wild with the unknown. News anchors couldn't stop talking about it. Major publications ran headlines screaming, Meryl Streep's secret meeting in Paris? What's the real story? From Hollywood to global influence? The mysterious meeting of Meryl Streep. The pressure mounted and no one knew the answers, but everyone had an opinion. Meryl's phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from her publicist. We need to address this. Now. It was too late to undo the damage. The leak had already taken on a life of its own, and the world was watching. The questions had only just begun, and the answers were nowhere to be found. In the room, the tension thickened. Everyone knew the meeting couldn't continue like this. The secrecy had already been shattered. What had been intended to be a quiet, behind-the-scenes discussion had now turned into a media frenzy. Meryl looked at the others in the room, their faces now marked with urgency. The leak had done its job, it had set everything in motion. And there was no turning back. As she sat in silence, staring at the glowing screen in her hand, Meryl knew one thing for sure. Whatever was about to unfold, it would be far bigger than she had ever imagined. Inside the private meeting, Meryl sat still, her face calm but her mind racing. She had spent years navigating the spotlight, learning how to keep her composure in front of cameras, journalists, and fans. But this was different. There was a weight in the air, a heaviness that settled on her shoulders as the conversation began to unfold. She tried to focus on the discussions around her, but they were like a blur of voices and fragmented thoughts. Politicians, activists, and even a few powerful business tycoons were present. Each person seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle, and it was clear from the start that Meryl wasn't here as a mere celebrity guest. No, this was much more than a movie deal or a promotional appearance. Her role in this gathering went beyond anything she had ever imagined. As the conversations deepened, the pieces slowly started to fall into place. This wasn't a film project. This wasn't a new charity event. This was a global movement, one that would reshape the world as they knew it. The room was filled with tension, and Meryl could feel it building with each passing second. A passionate argument broke out between two factions, each with their own vision of how to move forward. The stakes were enormous. The room vibrated with urgency, the air thick with conflicting interests, powerful egos, and personal stakes. Meryl sat quietly, her expression neutral, but inside, her mind raced. She had been brought here for a reason. She wasn't just a bystander. She wasn't just an observer of this world-changing discussion. She was at the center of it all, and the weight of the responsibility was starting to sink in. The debate grew heated. Voices rose, each side vying for influence. Some argued that the focus should be on policy changes to address the climate crisis. Others believed the solution lay in technology and innovation. Still, others wanted to take a more radical approach, pushing for a complete overhaul of global systems. Meryl listened, weighing every word, trying to make sense of what was at stake. The tension in the room was palpable, but she didn't let it show. She was no stranger to high-pressure situations, but this was something else. The decisions being made here weren't just about personal gain or political leverage. They were about the future. The future of the planet. The future of millions of lives. Her presence here was not just symbolic. She had been chosen to make a decision. A decision that could tip the balance of power in a world teetering on the edge of irreversible change. The weight of the moment was almost suffocating. What role would she play in this global initiative? What was she willing to risk? As the room grew quieter, all eyes turned to her. It was clear now, Meryl was being asked to take a stand. This wasn't just about lending her name to a cause, it was about actively shaping the course of history. Her involvement would influence policies, global movements, and maybe even the lives of generations to come. Meryl's hands clenched slightly at her sides, but she didn't flinch. She had been in the room with world leaders, with influencers and game-changers before. But this felt like a crossroads. Every word, every gesture would matter. Her mind raced with the weight of the decision. The stakes were high, far higher than anything she had ever dealt with before. There was no script, no rehearsal. She wasn't just being asked to act, she was being asked to change the world. The debate continued, the room still divided. But Meryl knew one thing for certain. Whatever decision she made, it would reverberate far beyond this room. And it would affect more lives than she could possibly imagine. Finally, the truth came out, and the air in the room shifted in an instant. Meryl had waited long enough, and now there was no turning back. She stood slowly, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The conversations had been building toward this moment, and it was time to reveal the reason why she was here. Meryl wasn't in Paris for a film, nor was she there to promote her next project or attend a glamorous gala. No. She was there to lead something much bigger, a global initiative aimed at tackling one of the most pressing issues of our time, climate change. The room fell silent as the full scope of the project unfolded. Meryl's name had been tied to a groundbreaking international environmental pact, one that would span continents and influence governments, corporations, and activists alike. This wasn't just another celebrity-led campaign. This was an effort to fundamentally alter the trajectory of the planet. The realization hit everyone like a tidal wave. For years, Meryl had been involved in this initiative, but she had kept it under wraps, carefully, deliberately. No one knew. Not her closest friends. Not her colleagues. Not even the press. Her involvement had been shrouded in secrecy, protected like a fragile secret that could change the course of history. The goal of the pact was bold, perhaps the boldest thing Meryl had ever been a part of. It wasn't just about reducing carbon emissions or fighting for conservation. It was about saving endangered ecosystems, revitalizing damaged environments, and, most importantly, shifting the global agenda toward sustainability. The project aimed to bring together nations, industries, and individuals in a way that would create long-lasting, systemic change. The media had been buzzing with fragments of information. The leak had revealed only glimpses of the truth, leaving the world to speculate wildly. But now the full picture was clear. And it was more stunning than anyone could have imagined. Meryl Streep, the Hollywood icon, known for her roles in timeless films, her grace on red carpets, and her long-standing career, was now at the helm of a mission that could change the future of the planet. The world was stunned. As the news began to sink in, the internet lit up with disbelief and awe. People couldn't wrap their minds around it. Meryl Streep, the actress who had won multiple Academy Awards and starred in countless beloved films, was now leading a global movement for environmental justice? It didn't seem possible. But the evidence was undeniable. And yet, Meryl wasn't seeking the limelight. She hadn't done this for recognition. She wasn't here to capitalize on her fame or play a role in a political drama. No, her passion for the environment had led her to this pivotal moment. The risks were enormous. The project was ambitious. And failure could have catastrophic consequences. The conversations in the room were now electric, a mix of admiration and tension. Meryl had already given her life to the arts, to the roles that had shaped her career. But now she was giving it to something much larger. She was putting herself at the forefront of a battle that would define the next generation. This wasn't just about film or fame or power. This was about the future of the Earth. And Meryl knew that the path ahead would be filled with obstacles, both political and personal. But she also knew that this was her moment. The media couldn't get enough. News outlets scrambled to cover the shocking revelation. Meryl Streep leading the fight against climate change? The actress is at the heart of a groundbreaking environmental pact. The headlines screamed, and the world for the first time began to understand the magnitude of what she was truly doing. It wasn't just a PR stunt. This was real. It was happening. And Meryl was the one pushing it forward, despite the risks and the controversy that came with it. The world was now watching her every move, and the stakes had never been higher. What had once been a secret was now an open invitation for change. But as the revelation spread, the question lingered. Would Meryl's courage be enough to overcome the challenges ahead? Could one woman, even with the world's attention on her, truly alter the future of the planet? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. The leak sent shockwaves across the globe. Meryl's name, once synonymous with film and artistry, was now tied to a far more urgent cause. Social media exploded with reactions, ranging from admiration to outrage. People couldn't seem to decide whether they were in awe of her courage or disgusted by her involvement in something so political. On one side, the public hailed her as a trailblazer, an actress who had used her fame to spearhead a cause greater than herself. Environmental activists and global changemakers celebrated her leadership, recognizing the influence she could bring to the movement. Tweets flooded in, praising her for stepping out of her comfort zone and using her platform to fight for the planet's future. Meryl Streep, the environmental hero we didn't know we needed, some declared, others even dubbed her the voice of the planet. But on the flip side, criticism poured in. Some saw her involvement as a dangerous move, one that put her at odds with her traditional role in the entertainment world. They argued that a Hollywood actress should stick to acting and leave political matters to the experts. Stay in your lane, Meryl, others mocked. What does an actress know about saving the world? The backlash grew as those opposed to her stance accused her of trying to push an agenda that had no place in her industry. Meryl's publicist was inundated with phone calls. Talk show hosts scrambled to get her on air, eager to have her explain herself, wanting to know how she had gone from beloved actress to global activist seemingly overnight. Journalists wanted answers and they wanted them fast. Yet Meryl remained quiet. She didn't issue any public statements in the immediate aftermath. She didn't seek the spotlight, not yet. Instead, she took time to reflect. It had all happened so quickly, and the weight of it was beginning to settle in. Days passed, and as the dust settled, Meryl finally released a statement. She acknowledged the leak, confirming her involvement in the environmental initiative. But instead of apologizing or backing down, she embraced her role. She expressed that the decision to step into this cause had been deeply personal and was never about seeking praise or recognition. I believe we are at a crossroads in history, her statement read. This is about the future of our children, our planet, and every life that depends on it. I could no longer stand by and do nothing. Her fans and critics alike took notice. The actress known for her grace and poise was now being hailed as a hero by some, yet there were still those who couldn't accept her newfound role in world affairs. What would this mean for her career? Could she continue acting, or was she now the face of a global movement, permanently associated with environmental activism? The questions loomed large. Hollywood, after all, had long been a place where political stances were often kept behind closed doors. Would Meryl's bold move risk her status in the industry, or would it elevate her even further, marking her as a cultural icon who had used her fame for good? Would she forever be known as the environmental activist who secretly shaped world policy, or could she still find a place for herself on the silver screen? As the debate raged on, Meryl knew that things could never go back to the way they were. The world had changed its perception of her, and with it, the path ahead seemed uncertain. But one thing was clear. No matter where her career would take her next, Meryl Streep had irrevocably altered her legacy. The question now was whether she could balance both worlds, acting and activism, without compromising either. Would she go back to Hollywood, or would her passion for the planet take center stage? The world was watching, and Meryl had yet to decide which story she would tell next. Just when it seemed like the story had reached its peak, a new twist emerged, one that no one saw coming. Meryl had already made waves, stepping into the spotlight as a global activist, but the truth was she wasn't alone in this mission. The revelations that had unfolded so far were only part of the story. A much more powerful figure had been orchestrating the entire initiative from behind the scenes, carefully pulling the strings, directing every move. But who was this shadowy figure? Meryl had thought she was leading the charge, standing at the helm of a worldwide movement, but now the question hung heavy in the air. Was she truly the leader of this global revolution, or had she simply been the face of a larger, far-reaching scheme? As the last pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, it became clear that this wasn't just about environmental activism or global change. This was about something much bigger, something that had been set into motion years ago, long before Meryl had even stepped foot in Paris. The movement she had embraced was only one part of a complex web, and the truth behind it was far more dangerous and intricate than anyone could have imagined. The media, the world, everyone had been focused on Meryl, celebrating her as the face of a movement that could change the planet. But behind closed doors, there were far more influential figures involved, ones whose reach stretched into the highest corridors of power. This was not just an environmental movement, it was a shifting of global power, a reordering of politics and economies. The stakes were higher than ever. And as the final moments of the meeting revealed this new layer of the story, Meryl's expression changed. She realized that she had unwittingly become a pawn in a much larger game, one that was far from over. The media's frenzy intensified as whispers of the conspiracy began to leak out, but the full scope remained elusive. Who was behind this global agenda? Was it a secret organization? World leaders manipulating the system for their own gain? Or was it a single powerful individual who had been quietly steering the ship, using Meryl and others as part of a plan they had crafted for years? The cliffhanger loomed large. Was Meryl the hero of this story, or had she been duped into becoming a part of a much greater conspiracy? The world was left in suspense, eagerly awaiting the next chapter of the unfolding drama. The ripple effects of Meryl's decisions would be felt for years to come, and no one knew where the path would lead. Her involvement had already ignited a storm, but as the storm raged on, the true forces at play remained hidden in the shadows, waiting for their moment to emerge. Meryl had stepped into a storm that could change the world forever, but who was really controlling the winds? The story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The world would have to wait and see what happens next.